Hello, and welcome to another episode of Book Drops. I am Don Boozer, the coordinator of the Ohio Center for the Book at Cleveland Public Library, and also the manager of the literature department today. I'm joined by
Reggie Rudolph, lending supervisor for the main downtown Cleveland Public Library.
And Reggie is here to talk to, and may I call you Reggie, sir?
You sure can.
Reggie is here today to talk about one of my favorite subjects, and I'm glad he offered to co-host today, of language and linguistics. We both found out that we have a shared interest in all things linguistic and the vicissitudes of language. So I was really happy to have Reggie co-host. So we're just going to start, give you some book suggestions, and sort of talk about the subject as we go along today. So I believe you were going to start across the pond.
Yes, well, I thought it would be a good idea to start from the very beginning. As a famous song says, that's a very good place to start. And so this one book by Christopher Moore, How to Speak Brit, I thought was a great place to start because actually we get a basis from our language from England because that's how our country originally got started. And one of the things I found is that even though, which we'll get into later, of how language has changed, the English language has changed over time and for different reasons, we still retain a lot of the basis from what the language started off in England. And I thought in particular, we could look at page 61 quickly. And on page 61, it talks about the King's English, right? So it's very strict protocols about how you were supposed to speak English. And they had different sayings. And on page 65, they mentioned a baker's dozen. And I find that very interesting because all these years later, we still have that same term, baker's dozen. But see, that originated in England. So that just gives you a basis of why I thought this book was a really good read, because it kind of gives you an understanding of the basis of where the English language came from and why things were, even though it's changed over time.
And I think one of the things with British English too is I think we sometimes get hung up on the whole idea of, they use U's instead of, O's and, that kind of thing, in color and, that sort of stuff. And I think that seeing the similarities, because we also can get hung up on accents and things like that, but there's still a lot of shared, even though they put things in the boot and we put things in the trunk. It's the same sort of thing.
Yeah.
And along those same lines with the British, I had pulled one book here by the Cambridge Encyclopedia of the English Language. Now, this is a little bit of a door stopper, but this is by David Crystal. And David Crystal is a British scholar who has written so much on the English language and language in general. He is one of the go-to people for the subject out there. He has written well over, I believe I counted, well over more than 4 dozen books on the topic, including one that I thought was interesting. It's Texting the Great Debate, but he spells Great Debate as GR number 8, DB number 8. So people like to say that the language is going downhill. And what David Crystal continues to say is language is always evolving. Language is always changing. I think that's one of the things that makes it interesting. And if you are looking for a go-to general purpose introduction to the language, you can't beat the stuff by David Crystal. And what's nice about this one is it's a little intimidating in size, but there are some great charts and graphs and things that take up a lot of room. So you can So there's pretty pictures to look at. So
I like graphs and pictures.
Exactly. Some tables and all that kind of stuff. So he really breaks things down nicely and goes through literally the beginning of the English language all the way up to the present. So this is his books, and he also has some other very accessible, popular titles too, like Texting the Great Debate. So that is another perspective from across the pond as well. So
very good. Well, since we started across the pond, what happened after we came over the pond? So that's where this next book comes in, Speaking American, A History of English in the United States. This is a very good book because it breaks down the periods of time in America. So if you look here on the table of contents, it talks about different locations where language became really interesting, affected the whole United States in different time periods. So it talks about Boston in 1650 to
Boston.
Yeah. See, I changed it to 1700, Philadelphia 1750 to 1800, Chicago 1900 to 1950, and even Los Angeles 1915 to 2000. So there were different events that happened in these areas that helped change, as we talked about, the language over a period of time. I think on page 142, there is a little excerpt about Chicago being basically the second hub outside of New York. And they had an influx of a lot of people from a lot of different other countries. And so because of that, the language started to change and you get incorporated from all the other influx. Where I thought was kind of funny, where on page 142, they talked about teachers do not understand the language and cannot use or teach it correctly. And then they said this list included all sorts of different things, including the use of ain't to sentence final prepositions. So for all of those who use ain't, now you know where that comes from.
There you go. I think one of the you talked about all the immigrants and all the different languages that get involved. One of the sayings I think that I've heard is something like English is the language that chases other languages down blind alleys and beats them up and steals their words from them. So that was I've seen that on T-shirts before. So
I love that.
We also, along the same lines about where the British started to change into American, is we have founding grammars. How early America's war over words shaped today's language. And I thought it was interesting that this book actually starts with an event on October 19th, 1785, whenever Noah Webster, of dictionary fame, gave his first public lecture as an author of grammar and spelling books. And then he was also an unsuccessful lawyer and an unsuccessful school teacher. So his third career was writing grammar books and spelling books. But Webster's soapbox was that we needed to establish our own American language. We were not British anymore. We needed to establish all those sorts of, things that we, and he really wanted to take charge of the language, really sort of set the stage for future development. And so that he did not want to always keep looking to England to be the authority, that we could be our own authority for our own language. So it's a really interesting way the book talks about all the grammar books and spelling books and dictionaries that really set the stage for, we speak American as opposed to we speak English. So it was a very, and of course from the late 1700s, we had a vested interest in trying to separate ourselves from the Brits as well. So not that we have anything against the Brits, but
no.
Hey.
Yeah, because it is in a way English, but it is a diversion.
Exactly.
So if you speak it to a British person and then you speak into an American person, we're all speaking English, but we still might have trouble understanding each other.
And that's one of the interesting things too. I think that English really has become the worldwide lingua franca, especially with the internet and stuff like that. So that's one of the things that English isn't necessarily just a national language anymore. It's literally a world language, and there are so many different varieties in India and the Philippines, and everybody has their own, Australia, New Zealand, the Kiwis and all that sort of thing.
Yes.
And so it's very much a worldwide phenomenon, for lack of a better way of putting it.
Yes.
And we all sort of understand each other on a certain level. So, but I think it's interesting the way that English really has, especially with, I've seen articles talking about the way pop culture is the way that this sort of just spread throughout the world. So it was at least it wasn't spread by warfare and things like that. It was pop songs and movies. So
well, there's always new things.
Right.
So how do you describe new things?
Exactly.
And then how do you incorporate that into the language of what we're already speaking? Or what we used to describe initially is not the same thing as we do now. So I think in one of my books here, that it talks about a driveway, right? So driveways, when the word first came out, was not for cars.
Right.
It was for like a horse and buggy. So now we have cars. So how do you make that transition from the horse and buggy to the car? And the driveway meant different things.
Exactly. Yeah, I think it's very interesting the way words can take on different flavors and different meanings and stuff. The language just sort of expands to take into account new things. One of the things that I find interesting about English too is that we do not have some sort of governing board that says, this is going to be the word for this. Right. It just sort of arises organically, as opposed to the French that have their official board of, this is how we will not say le weekend,
Right.
and everybody says le weekend anyway. So
yeah, I learned that when I was learning Spanish, that they are actually as a board, and there's a person that represents each letter. And so so therefore that gets problematic, because if the language changes and you don't use that letter anymore, then do we need that person on the board, right? So no, I totally understand.
That's wild. Yeah. That's and we're going to say over and over again that language evolves. It's
Yes.
a natural process. It's something that you just can't stop. So, I believe you had another one.
Yeah.
Let's go really dive into American.
Okay.
Then, so
did we want to do that one, or did we want to do the?
let's go ahead and talk about this one.
Okay.
I think that we can. You're welcome to use the
Yeah.
hardcover. We actually have a hardcover and a paperback edition.
Yeah. So I really like this book, Speaking American. I've talked to different friends about it, and I believe the author, Josh Katz, he has an online quiz that you can take, and then you
wow.
type in, or you choose how you would say it, and it kind of tells you where you're from.
Oh, very cool.
Yeah. So this is very good. I really selected this because it really is a practical day-to-day thing to help you understand each other. I have a little anecdote. One of my friends that this happened to may be watching. So if you're watching, you know who you are. Well, they had some friends over, and there was some trash. And they told this couple that was over to take out the trash and put it on the tree line. Well, the husband of the couple did not know what that meant and where to take the trash. Now, they're from Ohio, though.
Okay.
So, but therefore more closer to Akron, where they use devil strip. So once she was the wife of the household was told that he's from near Akron, say devil strip, and he said devil strip, he instantly knew where to take the trash.
It's amazing that you can have those geographic lines and linguistic lines so close. I mean, it's you can drive to Akron. I mean, people commute from Akron to the library.
So you wouldn't think it'd be that big of a line
Exactly.
of demarcation, but there is. And I think on page 147, this book mentions Cleveland.
Oh, you have to read the subtitle. You have to read the subtitle of the book too. So
okay, the subtitle is How Y'all Use and You Guys Talk. Speaking American. And on page 147, it says, perhaps no term is as regionally distinct as Clevelanders' word for the strip of grass between the sidewalk and the road. Almost 3/4 of the country has no word for it at all. But in Cleveland, and to some extent in nearby cities like Akron, Ohio, Erie, Pennsylvania, is the tree lawn. Other terms for this little grassy bit are scattered around: berm, parking, birch, devil strip, terrace. For my part, I've always called it the country strip, but Cleveland is the only place where a majority has a word for the thing at all. Right here.
That's wild.
Cleveland in this
right
book.
Here in Cleveland, Ohio. That's very cool. Wow. I mean, whenever I moved here from Western Pennsylvania, and people would talk about the tree lawn and the devil strip and I was like, what is this? Where is the devil residing near my house? I don't understand. It's like
well, I did some research on it and found out again it's historical precedent. What happens is that the roads are dangerous. So when you got close to the road, children would get hit. So that's why they call it the devil strip.
I never heard that. You have increased my linguistic knowledge a little bit more there. Thank you very much.
That's a big compliment coming from you.
Very cool. Wow.
Yeah.
I never heard the derivation before. That makes perfect sense. Yeah. Stay out of the devil strip. Yeah.
Exactly. So so depending on which region you are, and this book goes into great detail about different parts of the United States and why they say different things, or picking up, like I say y'all. Well, of course, there was the Great Migration from Southerners to the North. And then my mom's side of the family is from the South. So, I'm around people who say y'all. And so I say y'all. Yep. And I kind of enjoy saying y'all. So you probably hear me around work saying, hey, y'all.
I am a firm believer in that English needs a second person plural pronoun that everybody agrees on. So it's like you and you just does not cut it anymore, man.
No.
We need to, if you could pull up one of the maps in there, I think that it's such a lovely visual guide too, that you can get information just at a glance. Yeah. The way that they've presented the information, it's a really nice format.
There's many maps here. Oh, this is one garage sale versus yard sale.
Oh, there you go. There you go. Yep. So you can see where the blue, it's very nicely demarcated. You can tell at a glance. It's really, really well done. So
Yes.
it's a lot of fun to leaf through. I know that whenever you had suggested this, when I started leafing through it, and oh yeah.
There's just totally different things, pop versus soda,
Yes.
or soda pop
Yep.
together.
Or Pepsi, isn't it Pepsi in like Texas or something?
Yeah.
They call everything Pepsi.
Yeah.
It's like
even if it's not.
even if it's not. Yeah, yeah. So that is one I remember whenever I went to college, we had people who came from New Jersey, and we had the big soda and pop controversy going on in college too.
Yeah. What do you call it?
Pop.
I call it pop too.
Okay, well, then that's right.
Right.
That's the right word. Along these same lines, a little bit more in depth, we have does a similar job as Speaking American, but in 6 volumes. This is the Dictionary of American Regional English. These 6 volumes were printed between 1985 and 2013, so it took them that many years to do everything. They did it with, I think, hundreds of interviews in all 50 states. They used a written corpus of material as well, like diaries and newspapers and all those sorts of things, to really come up with the definitive regional English variations and words. There are some in here that I knew from growing up. So do you know what it is if you are Richie? Have you ever heard the word Richie?
As a name,
Oh,
not
no,
as a.
no.
Okay.
Richie is evidently, it was just a word for me. Richie is whenever like a small child is sitting in their chair and doing this sort of thing and not being able to sit still. It's like, quit being so Richie.
I've never heard that before.
So evidently it is a Pennsylvania German derivation. So and Richie and Shushly and all these sorts of words that I knew growing up that I had, it's like, people don't know these. What's the deal? I was like,
Yeah, I love that. It's just you still run into terms that others like. I feel like even if I go to Canada,
yeah,
it's supposedly it's English, but I still feel like I'm in a different country because
Exactly.
people say different things.
Exactly. It's really interesting to see those. Even and like I think you really hit the nail on the head whenever you talked about the difference between the tree lawn and the devil strip, just between Cleveland and Akron.
Yeah.
So I mean, you can have those sorts of regional variations just in a very small area too.
Yes.
So that's very cool. But the Dictionary of American Regional English is also available online as well. There's a limited free edition of it. So I think that you can play around with there, and it's literally if you Google Dictionary of American Regional English, you'll be fine. You'll find it. But it's a really fascinating thing to play around with, and this is a nice intro to that whole idea of that regional variation stuff too. So this is like if you want a nice appetizer and really enjoy yourself visually, then you can graduate into this one and really get down to the nitty-gritty details if you want. So. So I think we're sort of moving into then, we looked at the Brits, we looked at American, and now we're moving sort of into the linguistic category. Yes. So I think you had another book that you were interested in sharing with everybody.
Yeah, and I feel like this is a very good book. Highly Irregular. Why Tough, Through, and Dough Don't Rhyme, and Other Oddities of the English Language by Erika Arendt.
Oh, I have one by Erika Arendt too.
Okay, see, very good. We're just like 2 peas in a pie here. And I feel like this is one of those, this is very good because I feel like I've with friends and family and just others, this is something that we as a people talk about casually all the time.
Exactly.
I think recently a friend of mine, and might be watching again, sent a TikTok. And it was a very funny TikTok about comb, C-O-M-B, tomb, T-O-M-B, and other things spelled the same, and then ended with the person in a straight jacket because they just couldn't figure it out. It was very hilarious. But this is something we all, kind of just absorb.
It doesn't make any sense.
It doesn't make any sense. Why do it? So I thought for one on page 67, find it here. It talks about why we add ly to things. Like we say widely, or we'll say quickly, but then other things we can't add a ly to. And what this is really good, it talks about how Old English was basically transposed into the English that we talk in now.
Gotcha.
So when you move, for instance, quickly was originally Cwicklice, but now we spell it Quickly. Okay. So when you go from Old English to modern English, that kind of informs why certain things the pronunciation and spelling of it carries over and some things don't. So when we look at current English, we're like, well, why can't we do it? Because it's actually the transposition from the original Old English.
So it's almost like the spelling was a lot more conservative than the pronunciation, because it sounds like that what has happened is, I mean, we can pronounce things, and the way that the sounds are made really changes from region to region, but it sounds like this is the way you spell the word, no matter how you're going to pronounce it. You got to put that the ly or an ough on, even though you're not going to say it.
Right. Yeah. And then even it mentions in the book that over time, because of this situation of Old English to modern English, everyday people are actually kind of uncomfortable about should I pronounce it this way or not?
Right.
And so therefore that kind of carries over even today. We all catch ourselves and say, wait, am I supposed to say it this way?
Or you will read words that you never normally hear in conversation, and you pronounce it a certain way, and then you finally hear somebody pronounce it like, oh, that's the way that word's pronounced.
Right.
I didn't know that.
So this is just a very good start. It kind of gives you the background information of backward to forward, right? So what is the reason why certain words, even though they look similar, are different?
Exactly.
Because they don't have the same basis originally.
Yep. Yep. I will leave Erica's book for just a second. But along the same lines, one of my favorite all-time language books is The Unfolding of Language, An Evolutionary Tour of Mankind's Greatest Invention. And I really like this one because it really takes you through step by step on how language started from just the most basic building blocks, how some languages ended up with verbs at the end, and some languages ended up with verbs at the beginning, why we got prepositions, how modifiers came about from other nouns that you would put two nouns together, but one sort of like changed so you were modifying the other one. And one of the things I like is that the last chapter, which is actually entitled The Unfolding of Language, starts with takes you on a trip from a story that starts out, girl fruit pick, mammoth see, girl run, and how that evolves into a girl who was picking fruit one day suddenly heard some movement behind her, and she turned around and saw a huge mammoth charging straight at her. How we get from that basic building blocks to how we get to the full-fledged grammatical structures and that sort of thing. And it's a fascinating journey that the book takes you through step by step. Guy Deutscher is an extremely scholarly, he has all the credentials, but he writes in a very accessible, very, very fun way to go through this. And there's some pictures of mammoths and girls running away from mammoths in that one too. So, that one's a lot of fun. I do want to at least mention that since you brought up Erika Okrent, I have one by Erika Okrent as well. So this is her one of her earlier books. So this is In the Land of Invented Languages, Esperanto Rock Stars, Klingon Poets, Lodge Land Lovers, and the Mad Dreamers Who Tried to Build a Perfect Language. So this is an outgrowth of the idea that those of us who enjoy languages, who enjoy learning about linguistics, who think it's just a fascinating subject, can take that and turn it into a hobby. And that hobby is conlanging, or making constructed languages, like Klingon and Esperanto or Dothraki and all those sorts of things. I had the pleasure of meeting Erika Okrent at the 2007 Language Creation Conference. And if you look up in the index, my name happens to be in the index too. So I'm in here. So I'm not going to tell you why I'm in here, but my name's actually in here, and she talks a little bit about the Language Creation Conference that we were at. But she has really become one of the premier popularizers of language articles and linguistic, very accessible articles on a number. I think she's written for The Atlantic and a couple other Tin House and those kinds of things. So she writes, again, very accessibly and very engagingly. And if you're interested in the history of conlanging and where Esperanto came from and all those sorts of things, and the bliss symbolics that are that the guy was a little nuts. This is a really great introduction. It's not very thick, and it's a nice quick read, but it's packed full of information. And like I said, really, really nice writing style as well. So,
well, I think that's like accessible for everyday people, because who doesn't watch Star Trek?
Exactly.
Right? Or other sci-fi fantasy shows, right?
Exactly.
And then when you hear the actors speaking in that alien language, but there's syntax and there's nuance and stuff, like where does that come from?
Yep.
Who does that? Well,
and that's one of the things too with television and movies now. You really have fans who will sit down and scrutinize every piece of grammar and every line that's in there, and on all the fan boards and stuff, they'll say, well, why did you use this tense instead of this tense, and that sort of thing. So I mean, they sort of expect that now. Whenever there's a language, you can't just get away, hibbity 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 hey.
Can't half bake it. Can't half bake language anymore.
No, you cannot. You cannot. The only other one I will say, did we get through all the books that you brought with us? Yeah. So the only other one I will say, we talked about the dictionaries and things like that. If you want a nice quick read, The Professor and the Madman, A Tale of Murder, Insanity, and the Making of the Oxford English Dictionary by Simon Winchester is, again, a nice quick read. It tells the story of Dr. Murray, who was the editor of the Oxford English Dictionary. And he had a person who was sending in the citations. If you use the Oxford English Dictionary, you'll know that it's one of the best places for etymologies and citations of where these words came from. There was a Dr. Minor who was sending him citations. It ends up that Dr. Minor was in the insane asylum, and that whenever Dr. Murray went to visit him, they found out that, he was a murderer and all this sort of thing. But Dr. Minor is one of the people who just, I think that one of the quotes from Dr. Murray is that they could have cited the last 400 years of English just with Dr. Minor's citations. So it's an interesting read. It was made into a movie just recently. Have not watched the movie, but this is from a few years back, and it really holds up. So it's an interesting little tale of suspense and murder. So that's the Making of the Oxford English Dictionary there, Professor and the Madman. So I believe that we are out of time for another book drop. Boy, that went quick.
That did go quick.
Thank you so much for joining me. I just enjoyed this immensely. So
so do I. I did want to put a little plug.
By all means.
We do have a Words on Wheels program. Yes. So if you live in Cleveland or Bracknell, Lindale.
You didn't know there was going to be a quiz.
Oh, I didn't know it was going to be a quiz. I just went blank. But if you live in those areas, but predominantly Cleveland, then we can send these books. You just call us, and we can send these books to your home. So just call the Cleveland Public Library, and we'll be happy to look up anything for you. And if you live in the designated areas, we can send them to your house. It's like Amazon for the library.
There you go. There you go. And I will put in one plug, since we're putting in plugs. I'll finish up with a plug for the Ohio Center for the Book is hosting a Wikipedia edit-a-thon for Ohio women on Wikipedia. So if you would like to increase the coverage of women on the online encyclopedia, feel free to visit the Ohio Center for the Book.org, and all of the information is there. We are running the edit-a-thon online through this Saturday, so feel free to contribute. And we hope to see you in 2 weeks with, I believe, another co-host. And we'll see you then. So thank you very much.